Some of the most important stories are not the loudest ones. They live in memory, in family, in the lessons passed down quietly from one generation to the next. They are the stories that shape who we become long before we have the language to explain it. In this episode of Vital Voices, we sit down with Bahamian writer Cecil Newry to discuss his memoir, Growing Up Newry, a reflective and deeply personal work that explores childhood, family, faith, identity, and the enduring power of remembrance. Through lyrical storytelling and cultural reflection, Newry honors the people, values, and everyday moments that helped form his life and worldview. This is a conversation about memory, belonging, resilience, and what it means to look back in order to better understand who you are today.
Vital Voices is a production of Tag Studios and is proudly brought to you each week by our sponsor, Wellspring Lifestyle Group, where you can find freedom and transformation through whole person health.
Are you enjoying Vital Voices? Do you find our conversations educational, engaging, and inspiring? Then like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell to keep updated on new episodes and more.
Vital Voices.
Welcome to Vital Voices, the podcast where we amplify the stories, insights, and expertise of the people shaping the future of our communities, our conversations, and our country. I'm your host, Alexis Burrows. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're honored to welcome Cecil Newry, a Bahamian writer whose work explores memory, family, and cultural inheritance. Drawing on oral storytelling traditions and lived experience, Cecil weaves personal narrative and history to preserve voices often left unrecorded. His writing reflects a deep connection to place, ancestry, and the everyday moments that shape identity. In this episode, we'll be talking about his memoir, Growing Up Newry, a book that invites readers into the textures of childhood and the formative experiences that stay with us long after the years have passed. Together, we'll explore the inspirations behind the book, the role of family and faith, the beauty and hardship of growing up, and what it means to preserve both personal and cultural memory through storytelling. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure, Alexis. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm kind of excited about this interview, and thanks again.
Awesome. So, I've seen that your book was coming out for a while, and I always thought it was going to be an interesting read, just kind of seeing, knowing a little bit about you and your personality and your interesting approach to discussing things. And then about a week or two ago, I saw Patrick Robinson, who's obviously a mutual friend of both of ours, had put some commentary on Facebook about the book, and I was like, we're getting the show started back up. It'll be interesting to get you on to talk about the book, talk about your experience writing it, why you took the approach that you did, and to kind of give us some insight into it, not spoiling it too much, obviously. You want people to go and read it. But that's kind of where we're tackling this from in terms of getting you on the show to talk about your memoir. So for those who have not yet read the book, how would you describe this memoir in your own words?
Well, the book is basically about me. Mm-hmm. And if you know me, you know that it's entertaining and people have me as a storyteller or griot. The book is about growing up in the inner city, growing up in the inner city circa 1990s when there was a growing gang war happening off East Street. There was a raging in terms of activities and tourism booming, the opening of Atlantis. The story weaves from me being inner city, passing this a test for a private school, attending that private school, not knowing how I was going to afford it. It covers me even dating. It's a very intricate story about me living over the hill and intertwining with meeting new people who live in suburban New Providence.
People would be surprised. So, the private school in question is SAC.
Yes, it's SAC.
So, I know for me, there were a couple of classmates I had in my year who also grew up and lived in the East Street area. So I think people might be surprised to know, because sometimes people look at SAC as like, this elitist thing, but I feel like SAC was this interesting melting pot of people from a lot of different backgrounds who, was just looking for an opportunity to get a solid, grounded education and then, turn it into opportunities later in life. But I think people might be surprised to know that it's a lot more eclectic in terms of, the background of people who went and continue to go to SAC.
Yeah, actually, I remember waking up 6 o'clock in the morning and catching the bus at 6:30.
Mm-hmm.
And from Blue Hill Road, I had to walk from East Street to Blue Hill Road to catch the bus. And that street was peppered with people wearing the red tie and the plaid blue
Mm-hmm.
skirt. As we stop at every bus stop, 2, 3, 4 people who live in the inner city would join on the bus, headed towards St. Augustine's College.
Yeah.
The bus would be filled with only SAC students headed towards Fox Hill,
Mm-hmm.
Prince Charles.
What would you say inspired you to write the book at this stage of your life? So I'm not going to put an age to you. I get it.
I'm old. I'm old.
Get a
I'm gray hair all
ballpark of
over.
where you are. But at this stage of your life, what inspired you to sit down and put pen to paper or finger to keyboard and write this?
Well, I'm a chronicler, and I'm a blogger, so I'm always writing, right? But I'm also a lay historian where I record dates and chronicle people's stories. And as I have reflection about things that has happened currently, and then musing about what is happening, a number of people say, man, you need to record that and write that down. Especially when I talk about current events and said, I remember when this happened to me 20 years ago, and weave it into what is happening currently. So I started blogging about my life and situations on social media, Facebook. And I grew a following and to the point where I had to create a separate page just for that blog, telling stories. And from that blog, when I noticed that I had about 60 to 70 stories about me growing up and things happening around me, right? And then I started realizing that I have 200, 300, 400 comments of people saying, add more. They're waiting for the rest of the story, right? Because I used to write 3 paragraphs and leave it there, then come back a week later, add the next paragraph. Because you're busy, you start typing in midway. So when I realized I had such a huge following and realized I had so many stories, I said, let me compile this and create a book one time. So that's how that book came about.
The title "Growing Up Newry" sounds very personal. Obviously, leaning into that concept of identity. Your name is all you have in this world. But what does that title mean to you specifically in terms of just how that came about to be the name of the book and why that particular direction?
Well, the story is about a boy who's typically Bahamian, but it's unique to me, and this is why the name said "Growing Up Newry," because even though it's a typical story, the events that happens in the book is not typical. I have stories about meeting Big Jew. I'm not sure you're familiar with that, but he's a police officer and being arrested. And if you look at me, people say, why would a CA Newry be arrested, right? Guy with glasses, honor roll student, and that's a story for itself. The book has stories about me being haunted. I've seen ghosts, Cat Island hunting and hagging. I have stories about that. The book has stories about going through a hurricane, friends going through a hurricane, me reaching out and saying, man, I need to help you. The books have stories about mental health, friends them who commit suicide, friends who went to jail, friends them who were murdered. It has intimate stories about a particular gang called Border Boys, where I was living. My entire neighborhood was Border Boys. So I was actually forced to join this particular gang. So it gives insight of young boys who are trying to walk the good road, the good path, and having peer pressure and having the gang members come into your house and taking you out and say, you need to come with me, right? So it gives a testimony of young boys who went through, who are currently going through these things and need insight on how to escape. And also gives testimony to people who are growing up at the same time as me, where they can relate to the story and say, yes, I remember when that happened. I remember when that happened to me or my sister or my brother. So that's why the theme of the story is about me. And Growing Up Newry is a particular story that could happen to anyone.
Right. And I think that's the thing that jumps out even as you talk through is that, while a lot of the stories are personally yours, they are also relatable for, people in this generation who lived, or in the same times as you, probably experienced some of the same types of things. And then obviously at a larger level, national events, international events, would have lived through those as well together, and kind of have that perspective of, yeah, I remember that too. I remember being like on the other side of the road watching this, things like that. Like I imagine there's a lot of ways that people might connect with it, because it's entirely relatable, as well as being personal at the same time for you. Um, you know, Writing is such an interesting journey, especially when you're doing it from the standpoint of a memoir, right? What, I guess, when you sat down, you began writing, what were you hoping to preserve or honor? What were you hoping to get across? Like, I guess essentially, what was the purpose to say, this is what I want people to get when they sit down and read it?
Well, legacy is always important, especially when you have children. You always want to leave your story behind. So that was always in the back of my mind. Say, well, this story is not just for me; it's for my entire family, but it also is for my generations, because the themes that I covered, it covered my environment, my community. It covered my home community, my school community, my church community. It covered social events impacting the Bahamas, social events impacting the United States, social events impacting Jamaica. It has some historical context throughout the book where you say, okay, you call a specific date, it's a specific time, and this was happening. And then there's my story weaving within that particular time and how things are happening. It's like the story of COVID and on the beach, 5 o'clock in the morning, because I couldn't go on the beach. The company authority said, only time you go on the beach is early in the morning. So I remember swimming in the beach with my family. And as I reflect now, I said, wait, this beach is plagued with sharks. We know about sharks coming on the beach side. And I was actually on this beach swimming at 5 o'clock in the morning when
in
sharks would be out here and in the dark where I can't see anything. And I'm not sure if you know, I'm blue-black. I'm dark. You can't see me. So either being in the dark, pitching back in the dark, and not being able to see anything. And I said, this ain't fair, man. This is not a good thing. So I had to record that story because 30 years from now, 100 years from now, someone would like to understand what happened. And they would like to know that that Bahamians were forced to swim 5 o'clock in the morning in the pitch dark on shark-infested beaches, just so they could get a chance to be outside.
Yeah. The two things. One, at least you have the gray beard. It gives you some assistance, with the blue-black.
Yes.
But, that COVID time frame is going to be such an interesting thing for, like I have a 2-year-old going, he's going to be 3 in May. And so he was born when a lot of the COVID stuff had already kind of slowed down in terms of lockdowns and things like that. So when he's old enough and we're sitting down, because his sister's probably going to remember some of it because she's turning 8, right? So when COVID hit, she would have been 2, 3. So those first 2 years, like she might remember some of that stuff. But he's going to be like, I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean you had to stand on a line in the order, like on a day with your name for your family to go to the food store? It's going to sound like, something completely out of this world. It's going to sound like some dystopian future, not something that, is 10, 12 years in the past. So that's such an interesting thing. And I think that's why books like these are so important, because it's going to give you a lot of markers of different times and eras. Because I imagine, like for us, we also grew up, we lived through September 11th. We lived through, the war in Afghanistan, all of these different things. We've seen, like we grew up through Hurricane Andrew and Dorian on the other end of that. Like we've been through a lot as people who've grown up in this particular place called the Bahamas. And so I imagine there's a lot of that littered throughout as well. And it's going to be interesting for people to look back and be like, wait, what? You did what? You had to do what? And I think that's always, it's always important to have as an earmark of time. Let's go back to the childhood space. Obviously you sit down and you write something like this. There's a lot of memories to filter through, and to say, okay, I want to talk about this, or I don't want to talk about that. I want to bring this out. I don't want to bring that out. but like just looking back, the world of your childhood, what stands out most vividly when you look back at growing up in that time frame?
Well, it's not a tell-all story when I out people, so because I call names inside in the story.
Name names.
But the story starts when I was about 5 years old. That's how it starts. It starts about eating souse. I grew up in a Bahamian Jamaican household, right? So souse was something foreign to the family, but my stepfather enjoyed souse. So imagine me having a Jamaican mother and enjoying ackee and codfish, and my stepfather saying, "No, you're going to eat souse." So I'm looking at this, right? Being a precocious child, and said, "Man, that's slave food, man. I can't eat no souse." And him trying to discipline me, saying, "You need to control this boy," right? What you mean he doesn't eat souse? And I'm telling the story with him guilting my mother to have me stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
I'm looking at
wow.
them, they're looking at me, and I'm saying, "I'm not eating it," right? My hands crossed and frustrated, and say, "I'm not eating slave food," right? And obstinate. And I remember they served me souse for 3 days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I had souse for breakfast. I had souse for lunch. I had Tupperware, but it's big that back then. They give me Tupperware souse for lunch. And on Thursday, I fainted in class. And my teacher came up and said, "What happened?" I said, "Miss, I haven't eaten in 3 days." So when social services, yes, so I refused to eat it. So when social services called the house, they said, "What do you mean your son you haven't fed your son in 3 days?" He said, "We feed him every day," but he refused to eat souse. So needless to say, I've never eaten souse in my life. And social services assured him that you cannot force him to eat souse at all. So from then, my mom just cooked separately for me.
That's what. Wait, hold on. You to this day you've not had souse?
Never tasted it.
Wow, that's wild. Okay, so for everybody listening at home, he's still obstinate to this day. The personality remains the same.
And my wife loves souse, so she see me said, "You can't feed me. You
Oh my God.
You got to be feeding somebody else.
Bad
I'm not
decisions.
eating no slave food." As a free man, as a free black man,
Bad decisions.
from 1834.
You talk about your mom, and I think you said your stepfather.
Yeah.
Who were some of the strongest influences in your upbringing, and how did they shape you? Because obviously you're talking about a multicultural background that you're coming from as well. So how did all of that play into your childhood and your development?
It was an interesting childhood. I had what do you call a strong West Indian mother,
Mhm.
no nonsense, right? Who was determined to educate me. She couldn't afford to send me to private school, but she worked 3 jobs. And I remember not seeing my mother for months. When I said, because when she came home, I was asleep. And when I left, she had already left already. So she was at 3 jobs. So I had to learn to cook. I had to learn to clean. I just felt a presence when she left food there for me and said, okay, so I had no one to help me with homework. I had no one to be a guidance force with me. My stepfather was very aloof. I was someone else's child. So imagine taking care of a home and him knowing that I'm someone else's child and trying to be the disciplinarian also, right? So there's a lot of tension at times. So it gave me a lot of time to write. I had a journal from I was 10 years old, writing down things that happened to me. I still have those journals where I plan to pass on to my children.
Wow.
Right? So this is me at 10 years old, right? This is me at 15, different time frames. So I have journals that they can inherit and say, well, this was happening in Nassau. These are the frustrations my father was going through back then. These was his high points, his low points. So that I record. But you said the multicultural background. I came in I grew up in a multicultural neighborhood off East Street. We had Haitian families, we had Jamaican families, we had Bahamian families, right? But it was I would poverty stricken would be a strong word, but these were definitely working class people. With working class people, you have working class issues. We had government apartments in my neighborhood where we hear people rowing and cussing 2, 3 o'clocks in the morning, right? Because the houses were so packed together.
Everything's just tight.
Being a transitional neighborhood with immigrants, we had immigration raids, right? So imagine being a 4-year-old and hearing people screaming at night, people crying, and you peep it outside, and then you see that immigration kicking down someone's door 2 o'clock in the morning and taking out the Haitian immigrants or the Jamaican immigrants to the neighborhood, and you terrified him, "Mommy, are they coming for us too?" You know. So I had stuff like that, and then growing up during that gang-infested era, where it had the gun hawks, they had the syndicates, the war dogs, border boys, Hoyas, and these gangs, and where they was recruiting everybody. Where when I went to a public primary school, the only one from my primary school to pass to go to private school, at grade 6, the gang members came at the school recruiting. They say, "Well, you will be linking up." They knew I was going to Donald Davis before I knew what school I was going to. They knew Cecil Newry was going to be attending Donald Davis, that he grew up on this particular street, and they came for me. They actually came for me. And that's when my mom was determined, you are no longer going to Donald Davis. You're taking the test for SAC. We're going to send you out of here. And I'm not sure if you know how, again, it's East Street and Fox Hill's far. There were times I had to walk from East Street, a walk from SAC, Fox Hill, to East Street to get back home because we had no car, right? The bus stopped running. Doing sports. So picture time change, 6 o'clock, it's dark.
Oh no, that's
and I'm
a walk.
walking from soccer practice. It's a walk. 2-hour walk home. I reach home 8 o'clock at night at 12 years old, 13 years old, right? So the story also includes some of that narrative.
Yeah. So, you know, I walked home sometimes, but I was walking from SAC to down Auditor Estates, which is like, you know, right up the street, essentially. That might be a 15-minute walk, you know, or somewhere thereabouts. So that's a very different experience. My nighttime school was getting dropped there at like 6:45 in the morning, and during like this time of year when, you know, it gets darker and it stays darker, sun comes up later. You're there in the dark at 6:45, 6:50 waiting for people to come. But no, that walking from SAC to East Street that's a trot. That's a trot. That is what you would call a trot for sure.
And you also got to remember that where I live, let me put this narrative or insert this narrative. Where I live used to be called the border, right? Because you're the border of 2 different gangs. Parts of East Street I was not allowed to go on. So you picture I walking towards East Street, right? And I have to circumnavigate the gangs of East Street.
Right.
And to go onto Market Street, to come back onto East Street, because I was banned. Our section of East Street was banned from being on that part of East Street. So the trot was a little further, and a lot of running, and being chased after. Yeah.
I didn't even know that's how that was. That's crazy.
That's why it's important to tell the story. Few people knew that this was happening in New Providence, but people in my neighborhood was very familiar that this was a routine. I remember one time standing out of in front of SAC when you come down the hill from St. Mary's Hall, where the bus stop is, where the signs is. I was with my friend. School outed early, so it's like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. So we all were hiking down to go to Burger King on Village Road. And as we were a group of my friends, all wearing red tie, right, we're waiting. A truck stopped and say, "See him there? That's Glasses from East Street." And a group of guys come up with cutlass, right? And mind you, I'm a good boy. And my friends realized that they're chasing me. So all of us had to run back over the SAC, over St. Mary's Hall, because I was constantly targeted. So I had parents who said they couldn't drop me home when they realized where I live. They said, "Oh, I'm going to drop you home." And he said, "Where you live?"
Definitely
said,
not. No. Not today.
No, you're getting dropped someplace else. Not today. So I had days of that.
Wow. That's a lot. this is why the memoir exists, because there's so many interesting experiences and stories along the way. Family obviously is a big part of your story, a big part of the book. How much of an impact would you say that your family had in forming your character and your values? Because like you said, you were a good boy, right? So how did that shape the character that is, Mr. Newry?
So this is amusing. My mother is one out of 21 children, right? She's like the 15th child.
Wow.
Right. I have cousins who could be my parent, right? They older than my mother or around the same age, first cousins. So I grew up, I have cousins, like third cousins, fourth cousins who would be in my generation. But the problem with that is that they all live in Jamaica and I lived here. So I grew up by myself. I had no siblings living with me. I have a sister, an elder sister, who is 18 years older than I am. So she was out of the house by then. She was already out of the house by then. So I grew up by myself. So my mother was like my best friend, right? She's the one who would have, mind you, she only finished school to the 4th grade. So imagine passing the test for SAC, right? And they bring in these big textbooks, and then she's struggling to read with me, but she's staying up with me till 2 o'clock in the morning, saying if both of us would struggle with this math sum, right? Both of us would struggle with this essay and trying to understand what these words are. So I grew very close with my mother because she understand the sacrifice and how challenging, I'd say, attending private school was.
Yeah.
And so I grew up very close with her.
No, that's amazing to hear, because obviously, parents sometimes will talk about, even in our current generation, about the work that the kids bring home. But when you're coming at it from the standpoint of someone who's only gone as far as 4th grade, that puts an entirely different spin on it. But then to hear, sitting up with you, there's a lot of 2 a.m. I realize. This is about the 3rd or 4th thing where you've said 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. So obviously, sleep is an interesting part of your life, or the lack thereof.
Can you imagine? The book also tells a story about me being haunted, right? And 2 o'clock being the witching hour. For some reason, all my life, that 2 o'clock, I would have woken up hearing strange noises, things move around, stuff like that. So my mom would tell stories about she bathing my hair with white rum and having me sleep with a Bible on top of my chest so I don't get hag at night.
I know, right?
So the book also gives some details about that. Strange things, strange events happening. So that's also included in the book. Even the time I spent some time in Cat Island, and strange phenomenons happening in Cat Island, and coming across people who I swear to this day had to be a witch.
Listen, it's quite possible, especially as you get deeper and deeper into the family islands. The hiking thing is interesting. My wife has had a number of experiences with that, and that's not. Wouldn't recommend.
It's not a good feeling.
0 out of 10.
It's not a good feeling.
0 out of 10. But obviously that also kind of ties into the faith aspect of it, right? Because your book also kind of touches on faith, and how did faith shape your early life and your worldview?
Like most Bahamians at that age, who born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s and the 90s, church was important, right? I was very much involved in church, after school curricular activities. Regarding church, church was like Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and on Sundays. But I remember having I moved from a Baptist home to a Catholic school, and then I had a number of Pentecostal friends. So I remember at one point in time, as I tried to find a religion or find myself, a Pentecostal friend told me once, and this is a reference in the book too, that God don't listen to the prayers of sinners. So hearing that and trying to understand and appreciate that point, they say, if God don't listen to the prayers of the sinners, why am I praying? Because I'm sure I'm a sinner. So I remember for a point in time, losing faith and not praying at all. Because I say, I already concluded, when you're 13, 14 and thinking you know all, and say, man, clearly God don't listen to my prayers. So I remember I had a struggling time with that. And even struggling time of trying to understand Catholicism and trying to put that in the place of Baptist, and going off to college in the States and coming across a lot of Muslims and having that talk, and especially Black Muslims, the Nation of Islam, and considering saying perhaps I should embrace Islam, right? And then being a person of color, of dark color complexion, right? Trying to find that religion that suits me well in terms of being a Black man, and having a Black God, and having a savior that looks like me, who appreciates people like me. So you see that now I have a number of Pan-African beliefs, some African spirituality in me, and besides Muslim spirituality, I even have some Taoism, some Catholicism, Anglicanism, Pentecostal. So I have an eclectic religious
background,
contemplation of life,
yeah,
and how I view God. So that should be interesting.
That is interesting. I'd want to challenge the individual who told you that God doesn't listen to the prayers of sinners. I'm like, well, who are you listening to? Because everybody is started out a sinner. So how you even get to talk to God if you don't ever listen to sinners?
Imagine that. And he used to have fire and brimstone, because he considered himself a savior. We used to call him, when we were younger, when I was in school, we used to call this particular guy Jesus. He's light skinned, he's wearing a trench coat, and he had his own cult at school, right? Where he used to preach. So imagine being 13, 14, going to a Catholic school, and this guy having his own church. And he's telling the nuns, because I grew up in an age where we had nuns and brothers and priests, not priests, brothers, monks.
Yeah, it was the Benedictine monks.
So he's challenging the monks and telling the monks that they're going to hell. And I'm there saying, Lord, we can get kicked out of school. We can get kicked out of school. This place is a fool. He forget that we go to a Catholic school. And
oh my gosh.
This is a privilege to attend here. So my life is just interesting with a lot of interesting characters. Clearly. And I tell the story of those characters interacting with me.
Life is filled with ups and downs, joys, and also challenges and hardships, So I kind of want to ask you this question as a two-parter from both sides. What would you say were some of the joys and beauties of growing up in, that era, as well as some of the challenges or hardships that helped to shape you? Because obviously both sides of that coin will help to shape who we are as people. So kind of tackle it from, I guess, the positive and challenging experiences.
Well, when I was young, I had freedom. When I said freedom, I remember my mother purchasing a bicycle for me. And as a recreation, from 8 o'clock in the morning, especially during the summer, from 8 o'clock in the morning, I would be on my bicycle, right? And I would ride from East Street to Laipaki. No spare tire, no pump, right? And I would be out riding and scouting out the New Providence, seeing strange places up until 9 o'clock at night, and I coming home, and there was no concern. She just knew that my son was on his bicycle and he's out. That doesn't happen anymore, where it is a different time. So I had the freedom. I had the freedom of going by friends out east and diving in the canal, right? Having that experience. Going on Gladstone Road. I'm not sure if you know, there was a high hill on Gladstone Road, and I'm speeding down, going 60 miles per hour on my bicycle, right? Experience of going Carmichael Road and looking for people ducks. And growing up in a city, you don't realize that the ducks belongs to people. You just take it, right, and bring it home. And I remember again growing up in the city, I had a friend who used to, in quotes, because we were only 16 then, who used to borrow his mother's car. Right, we had no license. We just know that we could borrow the car, and he used to take us out east and said the people out west. And he said that the people out west used to leave bicycle on their lawn for us. So I'm inside this car, right? And I say, wow, there's so much bicycles they leave outside for us. And I'm packing the bicycles inside this hatchback, right? I said, why are these people so kind? He said, don't worry about that, man. They leave it for us. And every week we could come and get bicycles. So being naive, I found later that was not the case, right? But I had many bicycles that was donated to me by
the people
generous
who are
white people, I should say.
Who was leaving it out for you.
Generous white people, as to call them. Yeah, who's leaving it out for us.
That's
right?
wild.
So that was my freedom back then. In terms of, I also had extended family. The entire neighborhood used to look out for us, right? Even in terms of what I call being financially challenged, the neighborhood used to make collection. Like when I passed the test of SAC, they made a collection to give me. Say, I know you're going to a private school. You're the only one in the neighborhood who passed. Here, take this. You know, small money, but the donation was appreciated.
Yeah. You know, that's one of the things sometimes now it feels like we miss, just not in terms of like even just the financial support, but the concept of community and being close-knit in that way where you even know to that degree what's happening with sometimes even your next door neighbors. I feel like people don't even know what's going on. So I do appreciate that. And definitely the freedom of, you know, we like to say from our era, you know, you stay outside until the street lights come on, basically. And, you know, as someone who has kids, definitely not something that I would even remotely touch with a 10-foot pole nowadays as a parent, you know. It's a very different time. So that the difference in the world that we live in and how we're raising children in, you know, it is very different. You know, obviously, in kind of hearing you talk through to this point, your childhood is littered with a lot of interesting experiences, both positive and challenging. You know, how important is it to tell your story, and navigate both angles of that with the dexterity and nuance that it requires to tell that kind of a story? Because it's not just, you know, roses all the way through.
I think it's very important. Like I said, the story is not necessarily just for me. And sometimes you say, oh, I just want an outlet to tell my story.
Right.
But it's a story about my neighborhood. There's a number of people who grew up in my neighborhood who craved the book, who said, Cecil, I need to have this book. Because the story that you tell, that you weave inside the story, is their story. It's a testimony to them. At one point in time, my friends who I grew up with at home, we had to say that we're not sure we're going to make it out, right? We're not sure how long our life is going to be, right? But a number of us made it out. We made it out and became moved from working class to middle class, right? And there are a number of my friends, associates, who are still stuck inside the old neighborhood, who, even when I go to the neighborhood, they say I'm an inspiration to them. I'm a testimony that good things can come off of East Street.
Right.
Good things can come off of Taylor Street. Good things can come off of Hay Street. So I tend to go back often. I tend to donate often, especially books and time. And you know, you get that welcome, that pulp hero type welcome, saying, "Oh, that's Cecil Newry there now. He's on the radio now. That's Cecil Newry. That's, remember the guy who went to SAC? That's him there." You know, you hear they tell stories about me to their kids now, and whispering as I walk through neighborhood, people whisper about me still. That's an airy feeling that people talking about you as you walk, and still going to the old mama and say, "Mama, how you doing? I just bring this, put this in your pocket," you know. Or I know a number of people in my neighborhood, my old neighborhood, still don't have no electricity, so just bringing ice. Sometimes I drop this off, or I bring some fruits to your mama, or some peanut.
Simple things.
Just to go back and do that community, simple things. So I appreciate that. That story is important to me to tell, and I find that a number of people who still live in my neighborhood wants their story told, to let people know that they exist, that they're surviving, they're thriving, and also the story of those people who escape, because a number of us did not escape. I had a number of friends who went missing. When I say missing, being in a gang area, and
you just never know what happened.
Just to this day, we just don't know what happened to them. I have friends who are still missing to this day. I've had friends who end up in jail, right, and died in jail. And the story mentions that. The book mentions I had one or two friends who died in jail. We have one or two friends who had gun battles, right? Knifing, stabbings, get shook up, right? So it tells that story. And then dealing with the police, right? Being a young man, growing up in inner city, the police was not necessarily welcome as your friends. You know, they had saying the police are your friends. I know. Yeah, I know. Oftentimes that you fell victim, right? You get picked up, you get dropped home, you get slapped. I tell stories about me coming home from school with my books laden down and can't move, and the police tell me I got to come off the street now. And I said, yes, sir, I'm leaving now. And being slapped by police because I said, no, that you confused me with somebody else, right? Getting terrorized, right? So I have that story, and that story too, I felt there's a need to be told.
Yeah. You know, obviously through all of your experiences in life, you've become quite a known and respected voice. You know, but at what point did you begin to understand and find, you know, your identity, your voice, who you were becoming? Because obviously, like you said, now you're on radio, you know, your writing is something that has kind of expanded from me being in the social media space to now having a memoir. You know, how did you kind of figure that out? Like, what you even wanted your voice to be in the world?
Matt, I can tell you this story. So I remember when I first matriculated to Facebook. I didn't know what it was. A friend of mine who's attended university in the States, this is like 99 thereabouts. He said that there's a platform called Facebook, right? But there's no Bahamians on it. So I used to go there and just say what's happening today. And there was a website called Bahamas Issues, and I had people who do friends who do online friends who do commentary there. And I remember telling them, so I found this new platform called Facebook, and that's where I'm doing my commentary there. So I remember they matriculating from there, joining Facebook, and we would chat amongst ourselves, right? About 10, 20 of us, and that grew to 100, then to 200, to the following I have now. But from blogging on social media, I got an inbox from the editor of The Guardian and said, oh, we're following you. Do you want to have a blog on Guardian? And I said, what you mean by blog? Just write, the same way how you write, just write it longer. So I used to blog for a year and be paid just to talk about issues on the Guardian newspaper. And from that, continuing blogging on social media, Facebook, I got invited by a number of talk show hosts to say, oh, we see your commentary. Do you want to be a guest host on the radio? So I used to do like the circle, you know, and go around different talk shows. Do the rounds. Then I remember being invited to Guardian Radio, right? No one knew what I looked like. I'm not sure if you see my profile. I have a profile of eyes looking up. No one knew exactly who was C.A. Newry or what I looked like. And I was invited to the Guardian at one point in time as a guest host. And the host at the time said, I'm going to be joined by social media blogger C.A. Newry. And all of a sudden, there was a frenzy in Guardian. And I'm looking outside because it's like a fishbowl, and people could see a talk show. I see Miss Candia Deems came running out. So who's C.A. Newry? Who's C.A. Newry? And the person pointing out there. Then Juan McCartney came out. Oh, C.A. Newry's here. So let's see what he looks like, right? And then I'm seeing all kind of media personalities coming outside to ask to see who is the C.A. Newry.
Right, because at this point you would have had you know, some notoriety. And so people would have been familiar with social media.
Yeah. So that happened also at the Tribune, 100 Jams or whatever it is, that people want to know who I was and how I looked, right? Because for a while, no one knew exactly who the personality was. It was just a name. So from blogging, I've gained opportunities to be featured in some call it educational journal. I forget the right name for that.
Mm-hmm.
I was featured in the United States about blogging.
Mm-hmm.
I had a professor did his dissertation on bloggers and social media and the impact on small societies. I've been invited to a number of what do you call them? Embassies parties. Whoever is in charge of the affair and embassy personnel of different countries tend to invite me. They know who C.A. Newry is. I had the privilege to do that. So I get a lot of invitation, a lot of gifts nowadays. People tend to say, "Yeah, take this.
Yeah.
You're C.A. Newry. Thanks for coming."
Gotta love it, right?
Social media, social media has given me a lot of opportunities. And now I'm on a talk show host, which I only went to hold on. I didn't intend to be a talk show host. I didn't really want to be a talk show host, but I was holding on temporary for somebody who's out sick. And now I do that every day, Monday through Fridays, 11 o'clock on Guardian Radio.
There you go. So, we are running a little bit tight on time, so I'm going to jump through a couple of these, the remaining questions that I have. Do you think that revisiting your memories across the span of your life in this way changed the way you understood your childhood or your life today?
Yes, it has. And because of reflection, there's an issue. There was a conversation where it happened where there's space for homosexuals in the Bahamas, or whether Bahamians are non-tolerant of homosexuals in general, right? And there was debate going on social media, debate going on the radio. And again, how my book is based on reflection. So I give a story or reflective story, say, okay, this is how I grew up. I give a story about this guy who's younger than me, who I couldn't say if he was homosexual or not, but he qualmed when he walked. He had a high-pitched voice, right? And I told a story about how my neighborhood reacted towards him and his life. And at one point in time, he had a serious altercation where the gang members in this neighborhood was determined to make him, in quotes, man. And I remember I'm a small child, smaller than most people. And I remember coming and had to stand for him. So no, he doesn't deserve this, right? And people looking at me saying, "Oh, you're one of them." I said, "No, I'm not one of them." The idea is you don't take advantage of the vulnerable. So me having reflections of my past and realizing that there's a need to speak out. And people, you will say, why I'm so vocal now in terms of commentary and blogging. I find that from early age, I tend to defend vulnerable people. I remember even having getting altercations with again, gang members who would touch female friends of mine inappropriately, and me risking myself and say, "No, you can't do that," and forgetting that I cannot fight, and they know that they could fight. And I can tell you the stories about I have what I call broken bottles on my head growing up young, standing in the gap for people. So this is what I do to this day, where when reflecting back to yesteryears, I realized why I continue to be a voice to the voiceless, right? Because from early age, I found that I was always standing up for people.
Yeah. So you recognize that this is who you've always been, and it's just you've been placed in a position to have a larger platform to be able to do it at a greater scale than you were when you were, like you said, the small boy on each street who couldn't fight, who everybody used to call Glasses.
Yes, who everybody calls Glasses. Who the police used to call Glasses too. So imagine, yes, I was a small, fragile boy, could not fight, was not in the gang, but was in the gang, gang member through association, and get blamed for everything. I said, but I don't do anything. All I want to do is read. Just give me a book to read, please. Right? Yeah.
What do you hope that people who read this book will recognize or feel as they go through the process of reading it?
The most important thing is that the Bahamian voice is important. I sometimes speak in Bahamian vernacular, the colloquial term, Bahamianese, but it's not a protruding Bahamianese. It's a short phrase where you smile and say, "Oh, I remember that phrase." That's an old phrase, right? But the Bahamian voice is as important as American voice, as the Jamaican voice, as the European voice. And I think that we have Bahamian storytellers that can go toe to toe with anybody around the world. And I try to produce a good product, a well-written product, a storytelling that can be appreciated globally. So it's a global story that can be appreciated by anyone. And I was trying to give tribute to the Bahamas, tribute to my parents, tribute to my lineage, tribute to migrant children, tribute to inner city children, inner city people, tribute to people who went to private school, people who became middle class, tribute to the educated. So this book comprised of all of that. And I try to have that voice clear, that when you read it, you say, wow, this is a good product. Let me keep this for my child. Let me send this to my brother, or let me send this to my friend. And now I have a number of international people have an interest inside the book, because they see in the reviews, they see in the short stories on social media, because I have a local and an international following, right? So there are a number of people who are purchasing the book just to hear the voice of C.A. Newry.
Yeah. It's amazing to kind of hear you kind of talk through it. And obviously, like I said, just hearing you tell Stephen some of the stories here, it's a very exotic life with a lot of.
It is an exotic life. That's why it's growing up C.A. Newry.
Yeah.
Growing up Newry it's like the book is about me primarily, right? But it tells stories about different people and how I interact that. And like I said, it's not a typical life, even though it is a typical situation.
So two final things, being at the end of this process, if you could speak directly to the younger version of yourself that sits at the heart of this memoir, what would you say?
I would have tell them take more risk. I played it safe. And mind you, playing it safe perhaps allowed me to live longer, right? But yeah, especially growing up in the city, right? There's still bullet holes in my old homestead, by the way.
Wow.
But that's a different story. Being shot at, right? But I believe I should have taken more risk, perhaps traveled more, do more independent things. I would have told my younger self, take more risk, right? Challenge the status quo instead of playing it safe all the time. I would have said that. Take advantage of the opportunity of traveling more. That is a premier thing. I think I played it safe most of the time, trying to save myself, get out of the environment. And in doing that, I didn't get as close as I could have gotten to a number of people in my neighborhood, to get to know their lives better. I think there's a need to speak to the old lady down the road and intimately try to get to know who she is. I think there was a need to speak to the corner boy who may be mischievous, right? To say, man, can you play basketball, right? What is how do you see yourself in the future? I might have could have encouraged them to do more or expect more from themselves. And I think that in my way of playing safe to save myself, I was selfish with my knowledge, selfish with my skills and talent, where I could have given back more at a younger age by talking to more people. That's one of the things I regret not doing, helping more people when I was younger.
Yeah. But here it is now. You have the opportunity with your book, as you tell this story, the story that is, quintessentially you, but also quintessentially East Street, but also quintessentially Bahamian, right? You have now that opportunity through something like this to encourage, inspire, and to challenge people to say, hey, if the small can't fight glasses from East Street could come to this place of being able to share his story with his people and with the world, then, what am I able to accomplish if I just put my mind to it? And I think that's where something like this is a part of you being able to do that now, even in as much as you look back and you would say, this is what I would say to my younger self. And I think sometimes it's good to kind of take that reflection and say, this is a way to do that even at this stage of your life.
Yeah, definitely. I believe there's a book in everybody, and I would encourage everybody to write.
Yeah, and perhaps maybe the next book will be the book of East Street, where you go and you talk to Mama and the Corner Boy and things like that, and maybe expand the worldview a little bit beyond what you saw directly, and maybe dive even deeper into those that are still there.
Yeah,
tell their
definitely,
stories.
yes.
So where can people find Growing Up Newry?
Book right now is in Black Food bookstore, which is located on Robinson Road. I know the Chapter One bookstore is trying to obtain some right now, and also Logos is not there now. I'm just trying to get enough copies. I already did the negotiations. I'm just trying to get enough copies to put in the store, but it'll be in those 3 bookstores there. That's Logos bookstore, that's Chapter One bookstore, and of course Black Food, which is also the owners went to school with me, so they were tickled pink to have that book there. And a number of people who follows me, knowing that I'm very Pan-African oriented, so that particular store will definitely has it.
Awesome.
Black Food on Robinson Road.
Amazon in the near future?
Well, of course, it's on Amazon. I should have said that. Hey, you can order the book on Amazon. Yes, in fact, it's cheaper when you order it on Amazon. You could do it through Kindle, and you can always order hard copy, the hardback book and the paperback book on Amazon. And then you have the list of all the different books that I've written over the years on that Amazon too.
Awesome. All right. It's an awesome conversation. I think it shed some insight into how you went about this process, what the inspiration was, and probably gave some people some nuggets to say, I want to go and buy it. I want to go read it for myself. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on this episode of Vital Voices. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
It was definitely a pleasure, and thank you very much, Alex, for inviting me to talk about it.
Awesome. So what a thoughtful and meaningful conversation with C.A. Newry, and what a powerful reminder that our earliest stories are never really left behind. They continue to shape our values, our perspective, and our understanding of home, family, and self. Through Growing Up Newry, Cecil has given readers more than a memoir. He's offered a reflection on memory, identity, cultural inheritance, and the quiet yet lasting power of everyday life. His work reminds us of the importance of preserving stories, especially the ones rooted in family, community, and the voices that might otherwise go unrecorded. Cecil, thank you for joining us and sharing your story with us today. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening to Vital Voices. And until next time, stay informed, stay connected, stay well, and stay tuned for the next Vital Voice. Are you enjoying Vital Voices? Do you find our conversations educational, engaging, and inspiring? Then like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell to keep updated on new episodes and more.
Vital Voices is a production of Tag Studios and is proudly brought to you each week by our sponsor, Wellspring Lifestyle Group, where you can find freedom and transformation through whole person health.